about Broncos. I'm not really interested in rodeo, and even less about football. So when I come up to a cluster of folks talking about the latest game, I'm kind of at a loss. And although I find the underlying interrelationships of things that are seemingly unconnected to be fascinating, I'm not very good at small talk either. When someone asks, "So what have you been doing lately?" you can imagine the conversation starter if I were to answer it. Well, for the only time in my life, I've been out shopping for a dress. You see, last May was our 45th wedding anniversary. And shortly after, Karen said, "I think in 5 years, for our 50th wedding anniversary, and you're 70, we should take a world cruise." I thought about that a moment and said, you know, my parents had their 50th wedding anniversary the same year that your parents had their 45th, which we just had. But they didn't make it to that 50th. Maybe we shouldn't wait 5 years. Well, it wasn't long before I learned that we'd been hooked on a world cruise. Not any world cruise, but on Cunard's Queen Elizabeth. Now, Cunard goes back to the early days of refined steamship travel. And although they've relaxed a little bit, they still maintain a pretty formal atmosphere. This includes several theme nights, one of which is an Elizabethan ball. So that meant coming up with an Elizabethan outfit. I kept it pretty simple by Elizabethan standards. Back then, clothing was a really big deal. Elizabeth I's father, Henry VIII, is estimated to have spent in the neighborhood of $4 million every year on clothing. And of course, everyone else at court had to be properly dressed as well. The finest clothing of the time was imported from Netherlands and France and Flanders. Many Anabaptists were involved in making lace, weaving, and other textile trades. That was okay with Henry as long as they stayed out of England. He was too busy managing his own reformation so he could get a divorce, and wasn't very tolerant of competing religious notions. The few Anabaptists who made it to England at the time were dealt with quickly and harshly. After Henry, Edward VI relaxed things a bit and allowed strangers' children. So skilled tradesmen could be brought in and coincidentally to separate and control the contrary influences. Then came Bloody Mary and the Catholic pomp and ritual. While this increased demand for finery, all things non-Catholic were suppressed, which kept skilled tradespeople out of England, but it was great for those in Flanders. By the time of Queen Elizabeth's reign, a dangerous trade imbalance had developed. Sumptuary laws were enacted regulating what people could wear. With the hope of reining in foreign expenditures. However, there was a lot of leeway for the upper crust. Queen Elizabeth amassed a wardrobe of over 3,000 opulent gowns during her reign. So continental tradespeople, many of whom were Anabaptists, continued to flourish. They produced goods for their own use, as well as export. Paintings and engravings of the time show notable Anabaptists wearing extravagant dress. One even portrays Minnow Simons wearing a ruff. Elizabethan women wore voluminous skirts and bustles, but men were the real trendsetters of Elizabethan fashion. They were the first to incorporate silk, lace, and jewels into their clothing, which was all quickly adopted by women's fashion, but for some reason, they had not figured out full-length trousers. So men wore hose on their legs, which resembled bicycle tights. It was a pretty forward concept considering it would be a couple hundred years before the bicycle was invented, but it made it easy for me to replicate. At the waist, they wore breeches, easily replicated with gym shorts. The top part, the doublet, required the most creativity. While pondering paintings, it appeared to me that Elizabethan doublets appeared to be a lot like ladies' dresses. So I found myself one evening in a thrift store shopping for a lady's dress. It was about 20 minutes before closing. There were 3 or 4 employees cleaning out and preparing to close. I was the only customer. They knew I was there, but they left me alone to wander as I wanted. I quickly figured out that petite was not going to work. I gravitated to ladies extra large, and I was flipping through the dresses, and I'd hold one up, and I was considering possibilities. I put back this long purple one that was really plain, and then I pulled it back out. I thought, maybe plain would be easier to cut down for a doublet. So I took it into the dressing room to try on. Surprisingly, it fit quite well. While I was trying on the dress, I couldn't help but think about the irony of the whole experience, and remembered a story that's long been a favorite around cowboy poetry gatherings. It's by a rancher in Idaho by the name of Bill Hirschi, spelled Hirschi. When we were in Switzerland a few years ago, we had a remarkable opportunity to visit a cabin that had been built in the 16th century back under a cave-like overhang of a cliff. To get to it, we had to hike along the ridge and way back into a hidden canyon. The cabin was built by Anabaptists by the name of Hirschi, also spelled Hirschi. They were fleeing persecution from Bern and needed a place of refuge. It has been continuously occupied for over 400 years. I haven't had the good providence to know Mr. Hirschi in Idaho personally, but I think it very likely that he has some Anabaptist ancestors. Anyway, the story touches on a matter that most married folks deal with at one time or another. It's called the bra. I ain't much for shopping. Fact is, I stay away from town. Except when shipping time comes, then I ain't too easily found. A day come, I had to go. I left the kids with Mom. Before I left, she asked me, "Would you pick me up a bra?" Without thinking, I said, "Sure." How tough could that job be? I bent down and kissed her, said, "I'll be back by 3. Well, I'd done the things I needed to, then started to regret ever offering to buy that thing. I was working up a sweat when I crossed the street to the ladies' shop, hat pulled over my eyes. I wasn't taking chances on being recognized. But I walked right up to the sales clerk. I did not hinder how. I told the lady right straight out, "Ma'am, I'm here to buy a bra." From behind, I heard some snickering, so I turned around to see at least 15 women in the store all gawking back at me. "What kind would you be looking for?" Well, I just shook my head. I've only seen one kind before. "Thought bras was bras," I said. She gives me a disgusted look. "Well, sir, that's where you are wrong. Come with me," I heard her say. Like a dog, I tagged along. She took me down this alley where bras was on display. I thought my jaw had hit the floor when I seen that lingerie. They had all these different styles that I had not seen before. I thought that I'd go crazy before I left that woman's store. They have bras you wear for 18 hours. And bras that cross your heart. And bras that lift and separate. And that was just the start. They have bras that made you feel like you weren't wearing one at all. Bras that you can trade in for the starter cut when you're small. Well, last I made my mind up. Black and lacy one. The old lady bag it up. Figured I was done. But then she asked me for the size. Well, I did not hesitate. I knew the measurements by heart. 6 7/8. 6 7/8. Well, sir, that really can't be right. Yes, ma'am. I'm quite positive. I measured them last night. Thought that she'd go in the shop. Must have took her by surprise, so I told her that my wife's bust was the same as my hat size. Yeah, that's what I used to measure with. I figured it was fair, but if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, ma'am. I drew another stare. Well, by now a crowd had gathered, and they was all cracking up, and the lady asked to see my hat to measure for the cup. Well, as she had it figured, I give the gal her pay. Turned to leave the store, took my hat, said, "Good day." My wife had heard the story before I'd ever made it home. She had heard from 15 women who'd called her on the phone. And she was still laughing, but by then I didn't care, because now she don't ask. I don't shop for no more women's wear.